Squatch Senior here. Today we have a little different project we're going to get into. I am in the process of overhauling a carburetor. It's a Zenith TU4C utilized on the Caterpillar D2, D4 starting motors. Same carburetor is used on the John Deere Pony Start engines too, so this would also apply to what you would do with a John Deere carb with the Zenith carb on. So anyway, show you some differences. You got an early model and a late model here. The early model, as you can see, the choke valve inside, you'll see like a spring action in there. Well, what that does, with the choke closed, the pony starts and it will open this choke a little ways until you can get the choke taken off. And that's all done by a spring inside here. Now you can see on this one, it doesn't have this mechanism on the side. This is just a straight shaft. Well, to perform the same function, you can see this is the one I'm going to be working on. There's a kind of hard to see. We'll see if we can get some light in there. That hole there's supposed to be a disc in there. It's spring loaded, and when this thing starts, the suction of the air will open that and give you a chance to get the choke off, and it still keeps running without flooding. Another difference in these is the early model, the bowl was vented. You can see a vent system on this one. This is a carburetor that I picked up at a swap meet or auction. I can't remember one. I got quite a few of these laying around. As you can see, got a little damage on the base, but I pick these up whenever I can find them and just use them for parts. A lot of times comes in super handy. It's hard to get parts for these anymore. You can see this one does not have a vent, but you can see the raised boss on the float bowl assembly. How this one is vented is through the throttle body assembly inside, comes down and vents the inside of the bowl that way. So anyway, I'm not real sure. I know a lot of these have caused flooding problems in the D2 pony motors. It fills the oil up with gasoline, which causes horrendous problems with the engine, which these things only hold a quart of oil, so you get a little fuel in. Pretty disastrous on these engines. I'm not real sure here. I'm kind of thinking if the shutoffs don't work, if you don't run your carburetor out of fuel every time, shut your fuel off, run her out, you won't have a flooding problem. If you did forget, I'm kind of assuming that a vented bowl like this with a check valve, the fuel, instead of building up and running back through the carb, would just run out this vent. So opinions either way. The newer style, they figured they didn't need the vent, so they just blocked it off and away with it. Went that way with it. So anyway, I'll get started tearing this thing apart. It's been apart before. You can kind of see two different paint colors. This is the way I received it. So I know this thing's been apart before. It's going to be kind of interesting what I find inside this one. You don't find a carburetor off of these things that hasn't had some serious issues with it. As you can see, they brought me 3 carburetors. I do have one in the box here, another one over here. This one's strictly parts. As you can see, whole mounting base has been taken off, broke off. I don't know what they did, but big hole, big dent in the side of the float bowl. You can see right out through the side. So did find some good parts in here. So anyway, let's get taking our carburetor apart here. Okay, first thing I do is I take the float or the carburetor assembly off the throttle body. This one here has been apart before. I think what they did is they took the carburetor off the throttle body to access this mounting one. It's pretty well hidden down underneath. I do have a wrench I special made to do it myself, but if you don't have that, some guys will take this off. Where their disaster happens. We'll get into this. I'll show you what happened to this one. Okay, now when you remove the carburetor, you gotta be super careful. There's a jet here. Goes all the way through and into here. What a lot of guys will do, this will be froze up, and they twist the end of that off. And I already know that happened to this one. So as you can see, I don't even see part of it in this hole, so I'm thinking that's been off for quite a while. And you can see the broken off tip in that hole. That's what you gotta be super careful. Them there needles are getting really hard to come by. So anyway, when you take this apart, a lot of times I'll leave the bolts in and just keep this from flopping around. It'll kind of, and see if I can work that out. And I'll try and loosen this. I mean, if there's some binding in, be careful, guys. You'll run into some big issues. Anyway, that's where my trashed carburetor parts are going to come in handy. This was a very serviceable jet here, so that's we'll be putting that back into this carburetor. And then I'll take, this is a high-speed jet assembly. I usually take that off. Your gasket sets, they come with all the gaskets necessary to put this back together. And pretty crusty in there. I think I'm just going to go all the way with the whole cover. Kind of curious to see what the float looks like. Yeah, you can see pretty nasty inside. I don't know if you guys can see the dirt on there, but definitely needs some work. Yeah, the little fulcrum is froze up. It doesn't swiveling like it should in there. And you can see the fork. Definitely, that's supposed to turn really stiff, so that's something that'll have to be addressed. Okay, next up, we'll see if we can get the float off. Sometimes these can be pretty stiff. Not too bad. The new gasket set does have a new inlet needle and seat for it. Here's a gasket set. You can see all gaskets and everything will come in a set. They do have aftermarket floats you can pick up. It's very possible this could be serviceable, but one of my other carburetors I took apart had the new style in, so I will be replacing this float with a newer style. Looks like this thing has been in some water. A lot of rust on everything. It's a high-speed jet. Get that out of there. Yeah, that's all still stuck. There we go. You can see a lot of corrosion on that. Definitely looks like it has some water. Let's see if we can get the seat out. Oh, it should come loose. Definitely cleaning to be done on this one. Okay, let me get some of the drains and plugs off the bottom. That's the drain. Yeah, see that? You get another jet inside of there full of trash. Look at the stuff coming out of her. That's why these things don't work. They fill up with that junk. These can be tricky getting out. I like to make sure I have a good sharp screwdriver that fits her real good. I'll just give her a quick test here. I might have to soak it out first and then work on it after it's really cleaned up good. Yeah, I don't want to destroy that. Another thing in here, compensating jet. Very important piece of thing. It's surprising what that little thing does in a carburetor. It constantly feeds fuel at all times, idle, high speed, whatever, and it's constantly feeding fuel to the system, and you fine tune the fuel flow with your high speed jet and low speed jet. I've seen these twisted off. I've seen them where they haven't put them in and you can't get an adjustment. Your carburetor can flood. And most problems is you got all these passages in the bottom. That's where they plug up, and a lot of guys are saying, no, I can only run this thing on choke. Well, what it's doing, they're not feeding fuel these passages. So what I do, these are pretty much lead plugs. I take and drill them out. I can take a drill bit in there, clean it all up, And I'll be doing that with this one. There's different ways. The number 177 lead pellets you use in your air rifles fit in there. You can just take a hammer and gradually tap it in. What I like doing is I'll tap it and put a screw-in plug in there. I've got some miscellaneous assortment of them. That way if there's an issue, you can fix it up again. So anyway, I think before I go any farther in this one, I'm going to clean it up first before I start taking any more of these little intricate pieces out. Anyway, next up we'll get into the throttle body. Okay, next up, let's see if we can get the low-speed jet out and this long needle jet here. I've already given it a test run. They're pretty well frozen in. I got the torch out. We're going to heat this.